from the Signature Bank Studios.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. House Speaker Mike Johnson, when queried about Elon Musk and the DOGE boy, says, well, the counter-revolutionaries over at Team DOGE have cracked the code.
And the Congress, we could have oversight. The problem is, for decades, as we know, we haven't been able to do that job well, because even though we requested the data and requested the insight, it was hidden. How many of you know the bureaucracy was not forthcoming, right? They're not transparent. That's the whole point. That's the problem. That's the deep state that we talk about. So they were hiding from Congress. We didn't know that USAID was funding drag shows in Peru or whatever, transgender operas in Colombia or whatever, It's madness. But Elon has cracked the code. He is now inside the agencies. He's created these algorithms that are constantly crawling through the data, and as he told me in his office, the data doesn't lie. We're going to be able to get the information. We're going to be able to transform the way the federal government works at the end of this, and that is a very exciting prospect. It is truly a revolutionary moment for the nation.
Well, the data doesn't lie, but you have to know what you're looking at. And the much reported, we reported it here too, so I'm interested in the conversation with our next guest, that $1.9 billion at HUD was misplaced. Not exactly, says Chris Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. He's got a new book coming out this May, Inflated: Money, Debt, and the American Dream. Chris Whalen joins us now. Chris, thanks so much for being with us.
Me?
Hey, Chris. Mr. Whalen, are you there?
Yeah.
I am.
I know, and thanks for being with us during this difficult week. I know you're distraught over the cancellation of Joy Reid's show, so we appreciate your courage.
He's a hero.
This is one of my first reads, so that was very funny this morning watching the denouement for that one. But I'm surprised it took them so long, but there you are.
Well, yeah, maybe you can take Rachel Maddow out for a drink. All right, so the $1.9 billion that was misplaced at HUD wasn't misplaced at all, you write.
No. That money is basically to back up the two standby servicers, Selene and Carrington, who are there under contract with HUD, by the way, to essentially take over a failed servicer. We saw this in 2021 when the clowns at HUD that worked for Joe Biden totally screwed up the insolvency of a company called Reverse Mortgage Funding, which was like the late-night TV reverse mortgage shop, the biggest portfolio in the industry. And, Tom Selleck, Fred Thompson, all of that. So, this lady who was pretending to be head of Ginnie Mae at the time, Alana McCargo, got on a conference call with the debtor and their lawyers and God knows who else, and essentially told Texas Capital Bank to extend funding after they had filed bankruptcy. And so this led to a whole mess down in Texas, a litigation that's ongoing that I think HUD may lose. HUD may be forced to pay the bank because of the screw up by the people that Joe Biden had at Ginnie Mae. So meanwhile, here we are, waiting for the Trump people to make that appointment to hopefully give us somebody competent to run Ginnie. But they are cutting a lot of people. And I am concerned about that because, I don't like to have the government involved in markets they don't belong in. But if you turn it off suddenly, it's going to be a problem. And it's going to be a problem in Chicago and New York and other cities where you have rent-stabilized housing that really can't be financed by banks anymore.
Well, explain that in some more detail, because as you write, conservatives like myself have long wanted to get rid of these government-sponsored enterprises that were at least a couple of the culprits during the 2008 meltdown, and you're suggesting caution, and I need the details.
Well, in 2008, the problem was residential housing. And for about 5 years after the crisis, there was a huge discount for homes that were in foreclosure, you may recall. And that pricing basically drove a lot of people out of single-family homes. It also caused a lot of banks to get out of the government sector, the Ginnie Mae sector, right? So what did Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD do during the period between 2008 and today? They got into urban, small, crappy multifamily real estate. And in many cases, they are the only entity out there that will finance this stuff. Do you remember Signature Bank when that went down? And all of those 8A properties and rent-stabilized properties that the bank had serviced? Well, there's still a big chunk of that sitting inside the FDIC, inside the bank insurance fund that the liberals, Marty Gruenberg didn't want to sell. But Trump's going to sell it. And when they do sell it, they're going to get pennies on the dollar for some of those assets. So what I'm trying to say to you is, yes, do we want to get the government out of multifamily real estate? Yes. It's a liberal cesspool, but we have to do it carefully and slowly because a lot of these properties are going to go into default. Fannie, Freddie do about $100 billion in new loans every year. So if you just turn that off, bad things will happen. And they will happen to credit unions and banks along with the investors that are tied up in these unfortunate properties. The truth is, we've talked about this, Dan, we need to remake a lot of these cities. There's vast amounts in New York City, those little 5-story tenements that need to be knocked down. They're too small to be viable economically today. Okay, you need more square footage. That's what it comes down to.
Well,
it's a medium-term problem.
So I mean, just specifically with Fannie and Freddie. I mean, you're an expert in this space. I'm not. So I need you to make it accessible for, the less educated, like myself. So how do you, if the goal is to unwind Fannie and Freddie, and that's HUD Director Scott Turner's goal, it should be the goal of any conservative to get the government out of a business it's terrible at. Then how do you go about it in a methodical way that doesn't crater banks and credit unions like you just suggested?
Well, using current law, if you assume we're not going to go pass new legislation for this, right? I would put both of the enterprises through receivership, which they didn't do in 2008. They put them into what's called conservatorship. When you put them through receivership, you basically leave the bad stuff behind and you create two new entities. And I would take the multifamily portfolio and put it all together. Fannie, Freddie, by the way, are almost $1 trillion each, about $500 billion each. So you put that together, sell it to BlackRock or somebody, you know what I'm saying? You break it off and you get it out. You will probably have to provide some credit guarantees along with that because it's not a high-quality portfolio, and most banks wouldn't touch it, okay? Even at 50 cents on the dollar, they still won't touch it. And then you could probably combine the two enterprises and just have one GSE that would run this new platform they have, and anybody could come and use it. You could use it to do a private deal, or you could use it to do a deal with a government guarantee, and you would pay the Treasury for that guarantee. All of the existing paper from Fannie and Freddie has to remain guaranteed by the federal government. This is the big issue, okay? Put aside everything else you hear about privatizing GSEs. They have to continue to be risk-free assets, which means AAA. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I worked in the ratings business. I'm just telling you, it won't work. And they can talk about it all day long. We've been pumping these stocks. Fannie, Freddie were the two best performing financial stocks over the last 2 years. And we'll see what happens. By the way, the guy who's calling the shots on this is not Scott Turner at HUD. It's going to be Bill Pulte, the grandson of the founder of Pulte Homes, who doesn't really have a lot of, he'll be head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which is the regulator of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and also the Federal Home Loan Banks. Bill doesn't have a lot of operational experience. He's going to be in front of the Senate on Thursday, along with 5 other candidates for this perfunctory, confirmation hearing they're going to hold. I'm not even sure they will ask Bill any questions because the Democrats are in such a tizzy about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and what Donald Trump is going to do about that. So, I love a lot of the stuff Donald Trump is doing, but I am part of the loyal opposition. And when they are going to screw something up, I'm going to tell them. That's my job,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I mean it's interesting to have the conversation. This is why you want practitioners in the space to see things that non-practitioners don't see. So that's why it's an interesting conversation. Pull back then. I mean, Jamie Dimon, we talked about him a little bit earlier in the show. Had some pretty positive things to say about what DOGE is doing generally, and the idea not just of finding waste, fraud, and abuse, but in terms of changing systems to make the government, to change the paradigms about how these government agencies operate that are not going away, and
that's right.
and the efficiencies that can be achieved. What your view on that more globally?
Oh, I think it's unbelievably positive. What Elon Musk and his team are doing is that they are providing transparency into a world that is still 20 to 30 years behind everybody else technologically. The only reason that the federal government started migrating to the cloud about a decade ago is because Microsoft wouldn't support the bastardized version of Windows NT that was being run throughout the federal government. They had dumbed it down for security reasons, no USB ports on the computer, that kind of thing. And it kind of sort of worked like the post office works. But this is different. Musk is going to systematize and categorize everything that the federal government is doing. And I think the numbers are going to be quite impressive when you really give these folks a couple of months to go do the work. It's not something you do overnight. This is a huge beast. The Treasury, the payments, everything else is a vast beast, and it's all in COBOL. It's in, basic kind of programming language that 6 people left alive know how to manipulate.
But now this is not going to jeopardize the solitaire games on all the computers that the middle managers play at these agencies, is it?
No, but, it was so funny when Musk asked all the federal employees to list their accomplishments. I think, that's very expensive. Multiply every federal employee by 15 minutes by whatever they pay them, right? I think it'd be better if we all had to-do lists and we had priorities and said, this is what I'm working on this month. I'd like to see every federal employee with that. Because, if you have a to-do list on your desk, you've already answered his question.
Yeah, right? what you have to do prospectively, right, yes.
What are you doing here? And he's right to ask that question. Musk lives in a very, very competitive world. And he has managed, with a lot of help from the government, contracts and everything else, to build a competitor to all of the incumbent defense agencies, many of which are government supported. So, he understands how this world works. And I think, more than anything else, what is Donald Trump doing? My friend Jim Lucier at Capital Alpha Partners, who you should get on this program, by the way, really savvy political observer. He said, look, this is about something conservatives have wanted for a long time, which is to make sure that we know what the federal government is doing and that we have accountability. And Speaker Johnson was talking about this on the wire the other day. So it's very important what they're doing. We have to add, and I think a lot of Democrats, by the way, are quietly very happy about this because, they have concerns about the deficit. They don't want the country to default. And how do you do that? You have to know what we're doing. And the president has exerted control, by the way. The executive order they just sent out basically says to all of the independent agencies, if Congress doesn't tell you what to do, then you have to report up to us. Basic executive control. So there's a lot going on in the background.
Well, I wanted to get your take on something we talked to Steve Moore about quite a bit the last couple of times he's been on the show, of course, is what House Republicans are working on with respect to an extension of the Trump tax cuts of 2017 with some add-ons about overtime wages and tips and so forth. How important is getting that extension done in your mind towards GDP growth, this year and into the first 2 years of Trump's term?
Well, not extending the tax cuts would be a significant negative for the economy, obviously, because you would be sucking a lot more cash in the Treasury. But having said that, right now that's the only game in town. There is nothing else really going on in Washington except the negotiations for getting the tax bill done, which will be a large omnibus spending package. They're fighting over whether they should have 2 bills on the Senate side or 1 bill from the House. I think Trump is with the House side, and he kind of has to be because you have to keep that, a dozen, maybe close to 20 hardcore conservatives who really want change, right? You got to keep them in. If you lose them, you got to go do a deal with the Democrats. So I think that's kind of the calculus right now in Washington. And there's nothing going on in town other than that, and nobody is saying a word. The chief of staff, Susie Wiles, has locked this thing down 8 ways to Sunday. Nobody is saying anything. Elon Musk has rolled out new software for monitoring email and telephone communications government-wide. So you're going to hear a lot less from people on official channels. I told my clients this yesterday. I said, guys, things are changing. And by the way, the business community, the people that have to deal with Washington, we're in housing, are bewildered. Nobody knows what's going on. They really don't. They're not even communicating.
The monitoring of those communications, that won't negatively impact the sex chat rooms over at NSA, will it?
Oh my God.
Well, we'll have to find out about that. I'm very disturbed about those reports. You cannot tolerate that kind of behavior. I was a manager. I had 150 people reporting to me. No. That's got to go. Those people should get shot in the head today.
What's your view? I mean, of course, the T word continues to be bandied about by Trump, and the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, he says are going forward. Your view on the approach he is taking? Again, the argument being that these reciprocal tariffs, you lower trade barriers and open your markets to our goods, will do in kind, so we can either all become more protectionist and harm our economies, or we can all be more open-marketed and improve prospects for consumers in our respective countries.
No, I agree very much with Trump's stance. Tariffs were not the cause of the Great Depression, despite the propaganda from the Democrats. I talk a lot about this in my new book, or really the second edition of my first book. But, the truth of the matter is these are negotiating positions. Trump loves to do this. Why not fight with countries instead of Democrats? It's a lot more fun, right? So he is trying to get basically equal treatment. And, in Europe, the tariffs and non-tariff barriers to American products are astounding. So, it's basically saying to the world, we have opened our veins to you for almost 100 years, 75 years, right? We rebuilt the world after World War II. And now, we would like to have something closer to an equal relationship with you. It raises a lot of issues. Can you have global growth if somebody's not running big deficits, right? And then the other question that comes, and I think either Trump or a future president will talk about this, I say this in the book, is we may want to say to them, hey, running the dollar as the global reserve currency is kind of expensive. Particularly when you look at domestic inflation, what consumers have to pay. So, if we weren't running big federal budget deficits, guess what? The dollar as a reserve currency wouldn't work. Okay, it wouldn't be big enough. So the dollar, the world likes to have a big dollar, and we pay for it. We have, chronic current account and trade deficits, and then we have this huge internal deficit. So it's going to be something we're going to be talking about more, whether it's President Trump or his successor. I guarantee you this is not going to go away. So I like it. I think, most of what Trump's doing is a breath of fresh air. And I think a lot of it's going to be very positive for the country.
Christopher Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst. His new book, or second edition of his first book, Inflated: Money, Debt, and the American Dream, releases in May of this year. Inflated is Chris Whalen's book. Chris, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You never want to miss one of life's most important moments. A graduation, a birthday, a first communion, a wedding. When these moments happen, you want to make sure to capture them so that you and your loved ones can remember them for years to come. For over 30 years, families have relied on Tom Kaloran Photography to capture important life moments. This locally owned family business can provide the solutions you need for your important event photography, from weddings and birthdays to class reunions and golf outings. No matter the size or scope